Frank White, the Jackson County executive and the guy who at one time played baseball around here, should go down as one of the worst politicians in Kansas City regional history. And that's saying something because it's a fairly competitive list. Happy Tuesday morning. It's great to be here on KCMO 95.7 FM and streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app at 6:05. So yesterday, Jackson County tried to get Frank White to back down. The legislature tried to talk some sense in the Frank White, the county executive, his legal team, Gail McCann-Beatty, who's the county assessor, and say, stand down. The Missouri State Tax Commission said that you need to roll back these assessments from last year in Jackson County to a maximum of 15%. And Frank White basically said, go pound sand. He did a press conference yesterday, and if there was ever any doubt as to whether or not Frank White cared about you, the taxpayer, the answer is no.
The property tax issue is complicated, and it's important to be transparent in this process, and it is of the utmost importance that we are. Understand the confusion and frustration.
Stop it right there.
I'm getting pissed now.
It's too early for that. Did Frank White just say what I thought he said yesterday to Jackson County voters? Was this guy seriously preaching about transparency in Jackson County coming from the county executive? A county that has been the antithesis of everything transparent. A county that is required by law to, if they increase your tax assessment by more than 15%, they are required by law to give you a physical inspection when there is overwhelming evidence that suggests they literally could not do it. The timing does not work out for them to spend time physically inspecting your home based on the data that they had last year to give you the tax assessment increase of more than 15%. And I'm going to listen to Frank White gaslight the people of Jackson County with an opening statement and include the word transparency? Are you kidding me? But that's where he went because he has no respect for you as a taxpayer.
Of our residents, as it pertains to this issue, there have been many false statements, been many unethical maneuvers surrounding this issue.
Oh, that's so rich. That is so rich. False statements and unethical statements coming out of the mouth of Frank White in Jackson County. This is too good to be true. This is an all-time press conference from Frank White yesterday. Standing in front of the podium, his ability to say this with a straight face, John, is just beyond insulting.
It could almost be like an admission.
Yeah.
On his part, right? If you play that back the way he said it.
It could be. I mean, this is stunning. The fact that he thinks that you're going to buy this. The fact that Frank White put himself in front of a podium and read these words off of a piece of paper just tells me any kernel of respect I thought he might still have for his constituents are long gone.
The Attorney General of Missouri, Andrew Bailey, has used his office for a political gain. His lawsuit against Jackson County as it relates to property tax was nothing more than a political ploy from the very beginning.
Oh, it's all politics. Politics. I'm just the innocent county executive trying to do my job while I also coach first base for the Monarchs, while these big, bad statewide Republicans are out to get me. I'm the victim here. Yeah, that should work out well, as people are seeing double-digit hikes on their property taxes, wondering if they can stay in their homes. But we all know Frank's the real victim here. This has been basically the encapsulation of Frank White's post-playing days career. It's never his fault. It's always somebody else's, and he is the perpetual victim. Here's the problem, though, when you get into politics and you're actually like accountable for your actions theoretically. you can't really play that game anymore. It's one thing to play that game with the Royals as to why you didn't become their manager or their GM or something like that. But when you are a politician, when you are the county executive, and the incompetency of your county and what appears to be the illegalities with which the county operated when it came to these assessments, when that's what's out there, when those are the allegations that exist, you crying wolf, you playing the victim here is not what your constituents want to hear. You know, the couple that's on a fixed income that may have seen their property taxes go up double digits or 20%, 25%, 30%, and is trying to figure out what they're cutting from their expenses this month to pay their property taxes and also their insurance, which likely went up because the value of the home skyrocketed. They're not sitting there saying, you know, gosh, these times are tough for us right now. But boy, do I feel bad for Frank White. You know, we're trying to figure out, do we buy food? Do we buy gas? Do we pay the property taxes? You know, the homeowner's insurance. What do we do? Everything's gone up 15, 20% the last 3 years. But boy, I really do feel bad for Frank White. Don't you, honey? Oh, yeah, that poor Frank. He's the real victim here. And that's what Frank White is trying to do. That's the play here. And it is so insulting if you are a Jackson County homeowner, not even if you're a renter, your rent's gone up. That's how it always goes. The cost gets passed on to you ultimately. This is as insulting a moment yesterday as I thought you could possibly get from your county leadership. And frankly, it's worse than what I thought it would be, John.
Well, least we forget, he can't even claim, hey, my house went up just as much as you guys. I don't know what's going on here. His didn't go up. Remember
Yeah.
we went through that?
That's true. I remember that. You're right. And, I look at it, too, and it's like, well, you're Frank White anyway. You're clearing $100,000 on our backs, by the way. Let's not forget that. On our backs. So this came after the county legislature tried to prevent Frank White from basically going up against the Missouri State Tax Commission, which came out last week and said you have to roll back your assessments from last year to a maximum of 15% increase from a couple of years prior. But unfortunately, they are going to appeal. They are going to push back. And you know who's stuck in the middle? You, the Jackson County resident. You, the Jackson County homeowner. You, the Jackson County renter. You're just stuck in the middle of all this. As you have a state attorney general who is, trying to fight this on your behalf. Frank White is screaming, it's all political. I'm a Democrat. They're Republicans. As my friend Eric Wesson from Next Page KC, formerly The Call, we were on KC Week in Review together last week. And Eric and I are buddies. We don't agree on a lot politically, but we're buddies. And as he said to me, and he said on the show about Frank White, he said about Frank, he said at some point, you're blaming everybody else. Eventually, you got to look in the mirror. And if there was ever a time that Frank White might consider looking in the mirror, it was yesterday. And instead of doing that, he broke the mirror and he gave you two big middle fingers. 913-408-7957. Sean Smith is a Jackson County legislator. He's going to be here at 6:50, 35 minutes away on KCMO 95.7 FM, streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app.
The property tax issue is complicated, and it's important
Thanks, Frank.
to be transparent
Oh, please.
in this process.
Frank.
And it is of the utmost importance that we are.
Gosh, Frank White preaching transparency to me? Oh, God.
I'm getting pissed now.
Are you kidding me? We got to be transparent, says the least transparent guy in Kansas City area politics, John. Are you kidding me?
It's cliche. We had Valentina Gomez, among many others. I'm telling you, the transparency from politicians, statements like I like long walks on the beach. Yeah. It's just, what? And they all say it.
And I know I got a little worked up last segment, and listen, it's the morning. We're going off to the office, so I want to keep it as fun as we can within reason. But this thing really just irks me, and I'm not a Jackson County resident, but we have spent a year taking your calls, and feeling your pain on this show, emotionally, physically, financially, that you've dealt with on this issue. And your leaders don't care. They just don't care. Instead, I got to listen to Frank White talk about transparency. Oh, my goodness.
Show some RESPICT.
Just a little respect. That's all I'm asking for here. And that's all you should be asking for. But it's also why you don't elect a guy based on his baseball card from 40 years ago. And that was a mistake made by the county voters back in 22 when Frank ran for re-election against a competent Teresa Galvin, who was on the legislature, who, yes, was a Republican, but, she really was, middle of the road. She would have been fine for Jackson County, which obviously is a Democratic county, but she would have worked. Would have worked. Halo, you're on KCMO. What's up?
Hello, dear. I had my appraisal or assessment doubled, and I actually called to have it. I asked if they drove by my house and reassessed it, and they said no, that the Kansas totally doubled everyone's taxes.
Well, clearly, Halo, it is an issue on both sides of our state line, obviously. So, listen, that's got to get that figured out. I feel for you. Jonathan, Kansas City, what's up, big guy?
How you doing? What I want to know is, he's going to appeal. Okay. These politicians, I want them, tell us what the next few moves on the chessboard is going to be. Do you have a strategy? What's your grounds for appeal? And because, I don't like the ruling is not legal grounds. What I want to hear is, Frank White during his hearing yesterday or his public statement, he could have said, here are my grounds. And, this shows that I'm competent. I'm actually thinking about legalities. Instead, what I hear is somebody who's ignoring judicial orders and trying to obstruct the proceedings to try to not have a vote to override his veto. I don't know. That sounds like a threat to democracy. That sounds like insurrection to me. And, the Freedom Incorporated that endorsed him, there's a lot of freedom going on around here. People losing their houses, no big deal. Freedom everywhere.
Yeah. Yep. Ain't that the truth? Well said, Jonathan. Frank's always the victim. He's no one knows a victim like Frank White. He's a victim in his own mind, and it predates his political days. Goes back to his time, obviously, in his relationship with the Royals. So, it's a long part of Kansas City history, the old chip on the shoulder, going back to, him, George Brett, who's the golden boy, the whole thing. This thing has a long, long history in Kansas City. And it's one thing when it's just, petty former baseball players with a big ego getting into it. But now, when it involves you, the little taxpayer getting screwed, that's where we got problems here. Patrick's in Independence. Patrick, you're on KCMO. What's happening?
Hey, well, when Jackson County was originally faced with this, their response was, well, we couldn't give you the money back anyways. It's already been dispersed. So when you get this inflated tax bill, that's what your answer should be. You know what? I can't pay these taxes because that money, it's already been dispersed.
Well done. You know what? That's great, Patrick. That's great. I'm going to tell these blowhards, you got no money from me. I've dispersed it.
I would have paid you, but the money's already been dispersed.
Yeah, and you know what? I dispersed it thanks to Joe Biden's America, where everything in my life has gone up 15 to 20%. So if you want to find it somewhere, go ask Grandpa and see if he's got a hold of it.
Come on, man.
You can go claim it from Hy-Vee and Price Chopper and Trip. That's where it is. That's where I dispersed it to.
Yes.
Go ahead and get it.
Yes, and I dispersed it as well. Excellent work with, increases in sales tax dollars as well. Because if your grocery bill goes up 20% from $100 to $120, guess what? Local municipalities and your state and everything else is getting more money in sales tax revenues. Because 20% on 120 is more than 20%, obviously, in 100. So around and around and around we go. It's the little secret on inflation, by the way. The people that are theoretically in charge of reducing it don't really get impacted. If nothing else, the government actually gets more money, courtesy of inflation, by way of property taxes, by way of sales taxes. Everything else that goes up, they benefit from. If the cost of, buying something at Home Depot goes up 20%, well, guess what? There are sales taxes on that you have to pay. So everything continues to increase and go up in price, and they end up being a winner in the end. So they can grow government. And for the last couple of years, one of the biggest issues, I heard Eric Trump talking about this on an interview. It's something we've talked about on this show, and I feel like has not gotten enough attention. The jobs reports for the last couple of years has been goosed by government gigs. Eventually, you run out of other people's money. But they're hoping that does not happen, at least, before they can get someone here elected in November. Did Donald Trump get some mojo back last night doing his space on X with Elon Musk? Certainly was comfortable, certainly was in his elements, and needed that. Donald Trump needed that. He was a guy who sat there last night with Elon Musk, and if you listen to any of it, and I didn't catch the entire thing, but I caught bits and pieces, and Donald Trump sounded like a guy who was at ease. And he hasn't sounded that way to me since before Joe Biden dropped out of this race over 3 weeks ago now. He sounded like a guy who was kind of figuring out how he wanted to go after Kamala. And he did it in a way that was effective. He communicated well. And I will add this. He had an absolutely massive audience last night. Massive audience. So when you look at some of the numbers from that chat, you had 16.5 million people who listened in. 84 million views on the post itself. That's impressions. 319,000 comments, 111,000 reposts, 374,000 likes, and 46,000 bookmarks. That is from Elon Musk and Donald Trump having this long-form conversation on X last night. I mean, those are tremendous numbers. No matter how you spin it, those are massive numbers. And if you watched any of it, Trump comes off as a legitimately funny dude. He comes off likable but serious last night. Trump has all those qualities. And when he's focused and when he puts them together, he's one of the great politicians in modern American history, certainly in my lifetime, when he wants to be. The question is, can he be that guy for the next 12 weeks? Today is 12 weeks to go, of course, until November 5, when people will be going to the polls, although, as we know, that begins in 2 weeks. Got an early vote for 2 months before we get to voting day. But anyway, if he can be that guy for the next 12 weeks, he can and will beat Kamala Harris. So you had the serious from last night where Donald Trump was talking about Kamala, and he's finally honing in on the issues as much as anything and noting that Kamala Harris is not a moderate.
Obviously, what's happening sort of overnight is they're rewriting history and making Kamala sound like a moderate when in fact she is far left, far left.
Worse than Bernie Sanders. She is considered more liberal by far than Bernie Sanders. She's a radical left lunatic. And if she's going to be our president, very quickly, you're not going to have a country anymore. And she'll go back to all of the things that she believes in. She believes in defunding the police. She believes in no fracking, zero. Now all of a sudden she's saying, no, I really want to see fracking. If they got in, the day she got in, she'll end fracking.
So that was Trump just pointing out that, hey, Kamala Harris, when she was in the U.S. Senate, was voted the most liberal U.S. senator left of Bernie Sanders. Trump just needs to say that for the next 12 weeks, and he's got himself a message that can work. Now, what did you hear, Mark?
It was kind of weird. It sounded like he had a lisp or was losing his dentures or something like that.
A lot of people brought that up last night, and I don't spend a lot of time on Spaces, which is kind of like an audio chat room on X. But people say, I sound like Trump, people say that I guess you kind of have that lispy sound. It's kind of a glitch within X Spaces. So I heard that too.
It's about frequencies and equalization. It's being limited, I guess, and so it comes through kind of in the middle range and takes the top and the bottom off.
Yes.
That's all pseudo speak for engineering.
Yes, there's the audio nerd engineer and John Anthony coming out, which I love.
Well, obviously my voice sounds like this. If I put my hand in front of it, it sounds different.
Yes.
This would be more mid-rangey.
Yes.
You got no top, no bottom. Move my hand out, it's clearer. You
there
get
it
the
is.
microphone sound.
Clear as day. You sound great, by the way, this morning, John. $1 million. $1 million. So Trump had his serious moments, but then he also had, his funny, lighthearted moments as well. And I think one of my favorites was this.
Biden actually did something that was impossible. Both sides hate him. Both sides. Yeah. That was a hard thing to do. Unification.
Unification, he says there at the very end. I mean, he's right. And here's the thing. That's why he's still trying to figure out and get his footing, because he had this thing in the bag with Joe Biden. Joe Biden wasn't liked by his left flank. He wasn't liked by the moderates. He wasn't liked by Republicans. It's not clear who really liked Joe Biden leading up to his dropout. Now, Kamala Harris, I'm not sure anyone really likes her either. But at the same time, the media is doing a great job gaslighting and turning her into a Barack Obama 2.0 on the female side. I mean, they did a Time magazine cover piece, if you haven't seen it, this week on Kamala Harris. By the way, she won't even do the interview with Time magazine, and they're trying to turn her into George Washington. And they wouldn't do the interview. So that tells you how protective they are being of Kamala Harris. They won't let her do interviews still with Time magazine when they're writing puff pieces on her. If you have not seen the cover that's going to drop this week on Time magazine, do yourself a favor. Just check it out. But do it before you eat breakfast so you don't yak it up. 913-408-7957. Let's go to you. Will is in the Northland. He's on KCMO. What's up, Will?
Hey, good morning, Pete. Thanks so much for taking my call.
You bet, man.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so I liked what you had on there about Trump discussing with Elon Musk about Kamala wanting to ban fracking, because it's really important that if you look at the race to 270 in the electoral map, Trump needs to get his butt in Pennsylvania, he needs to get his butt in Georgia, because if he gets those two states, he doesn't even need the rest of the blue wall. He doesn't need the rest of the Rust Belt, because those two states alone, assuming he gets North Carolina, Ohio, and Florida, which are heavily in his camp already, he will get that 270 number, and he doesn't even need Arizona or Nevada. So he needs to keep hitting. I think he needs to keep hitting hard on that Kamala's previous comments about fracking, because I think that's ultimately going to help him get Pennsylvania, assuming that enough Democrat voters who maybe came out for Joe Biden stay home. But, bottom line, he needs to have Georgia and Pennsylvania, and he's got to keep going with that fracking message, because that's going to help him get Pennsylvania.
That's all he's got to do. You nailed it, Will. This was a big topic yesterday on the show. And it was just, for those of us who believe that Trump is a far superior policy option to Kamala Harris, he has not been laser focused the last 3 weeks. All he has to do is keep repeating some of the key points he made last night on his conversation with Elon Musk. Go to Pennsylvania, as Will said, talk about the fracking. If she won't talk about her record, then you need to talk about the fact that she was voted the most liberal senator during her time in the Senate before she ran for president from 2016 to 2019. Further left than Bernie Sanders. That's what he needs to do in key swing states, and Will is right. Now, if he wins Arizona and Georgia, then he's just got to win one of those three blue wall states, Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania. But yes, if you clear Pennsylvania and Georgia, there's a path without winning Arizona. But I think if he wins those two, he wins Arizona. So it's now crunch time. And for those of us who have been somewhat critical of Donald Trump here the last couple of weeks, it's simply because we want to see him win. That's what it's ultimately about. Tough one last night. Huge series for the Royals as they're taking on the Twins. You're heading down the home stretch. You've got, obviously, the wild card in their sights. 3-game series started last night up in Minneapolis. Wanted to be the fighting Tim Walzes. That's what I really wanted to do since he became Kamala's VP pick. Unfortunately, they lost 8-3 to start that 3-game set last night, and that is followed by a 3-game set in Cincinnati coming up this weekend before returning home next week for the Angels and the Phillies. So not ideal last night.
Not ideal last night, but they've got Seth Lugo tonight and Cole Reagans the next night. So hopefully that can get them back on track.
All right, good. So you're feeling better. You're a little optimistic. And if you're optimistic, Mark, I'm optimistic. I'm sure John won't be, but that's another story for another day. You optimistic, John?
No, I'm happy here. Again, like I was saying, if they were just in contention, I was allegedly going to be happy at the preseason. They certainly are.
Yes.
I know the balloon was going to pop, I feel. It just will still be a disappointment when it happens. But right now, they're still 2 games ahead of the Red Sox for that last spot.
Yes.
And so they're chasing the Twins for second place and the next wild card spot just to jump up that ladder.
And I am getting a lot of ads in my Facebook feed from the Royals saying, hey, buy 10 games and, put a deposit on next season and you get into the postseason this year. So they got a lot riding on this thing, trying to lock up some season tickets for next year. So we'll see how it plays out. So I thought that was, listen, not ideal last night, but still, you're sitting here on August 13th and we're talking about playoff baseball in Kansas City.
Well, and they're in it right now.
Yeah.
So, if it started today, they're there.
They're there. They're in the mix. So it's good stuff overall. Now, the other thing that stood out to me yesterday, the AP poll dropped. And you have what is shaping up to be potentially one of the most exciting football seasons in Kansas City area history coming up here in 2024. You obviously have the Chiefs going for the three-peat. But then you have Missouri, Kansas State, and Kansas all ranked in the preseason AP poll. You've got Mizzou coming in at number 11. You have K-State coming in at number 18. And you have Kansas at number 22. I tried to find the last time that these 3 teams were all ranked in the preseason, and I can't find it. I know KU is in the preseason top 25 for the first time in 15 years. 2009, during the Mark Mangino era, is the last time the Jayhawks were ranked in the preseason poll. So, that's just huge in and of itself and is a massive testament to what Lance Leipold is doing there with the Jayhawks in a very short period of time. It's been unbelievable. But look at how this is shaping up. Mizzou, KU, K-State in the top 25. The Chiefs right now obviously looking for that three-peat. Speaking of baseball, the Royals are in the postseason if the season ends today. This is pretty damn exciting stuff. This is exactly what you want to see.
And I just looked this up because I was very curious about this.
Okay.
If KU wins the Big 12, they'll get a bye in the playoff, the new 12-team playoff this year.
Yes.
They could host the Missouri Tigers at Arrowhead Stadium
in
a playoff game.
Well, hold on a second, though. If they get the bye...
Easy huddler.
Yeah. I am doing my Rex Hudler there. That's very well done. Oh, my gosh. Oh! That's what I'm doing, my best Rex Hudler here on the show.
If KU makes the playoff, I would do that.
Well, I understand. But if you get the bye, only the first-round games are on campus.
Oh, is that how it is?
Yes.
Okay.
So the second-round games, if KU gets a bye, which if they win the Big 12 championship, then they'll have theoretically one of those top 4 byes. They would not get the home game. The home games are only in the first round of the college football playoffs. So if they get the bye, they technically would not have a home game. They would play a neutral site game at one of the bowl locations.
Okay.
So
they would have to go undefeated and lose in the Big 12, get the highest at-large bid.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's very unlikely for a Big 12 team.
Yeah.
So, yes, for KU to host a game in the college football playoff at Arrowhead Stadium, they'd have to be undefeated and then likely lose the Big 12 championship game, get a very high seed as an at-large, and then host Mizzou in a 6-11 game or something like that, since it's a 12-team college football playoff for the first time ever this year. But I like your thinking there, Mark. I'd love to see a college football playoff game at Arrowhead Stadium since KU, because of renovations going on out there in Lawrence, KU is playing half of their games at Arrowhead and half of their home games this year at the Sporting KC Stadium, which is going to be pretty interesting if we do end up getting that. But I got to see KU. They're playing like Iowa State there. They're playing Colorado there. So they've got some very good games at Arrowhead this year, and kudos to the Chiefs for letting that happen as well.
And one of the most high-flying offenses in America coming back this year.
Got to keep Daniels upright, though.
Yes, that's true.
Jalen Daniels needs to stay healthy. If he does not stay healthy, there's no Jason Bean sitting there waiting in the wings for the Kansas Jayhawks, with his 4.2 speed and able to really carry the load. So they've got to keep Daniels healthy. And frankly, you hear all these rumors during the offseason that Jalen Daniels, tweaked his back, picking up his socks. I'm just saying, he is very brittle. So KU's schedule is very favorable. And if he stays healthy, they can find themselves in contention. I just don't know if Daniels can stay healthy. And whenever I put stuff like this on social media, KU fans rag on me and they say, well, why don't you talk about other teams when it comes to quarterback health? That's true for all of them. Well, yeah, but your quarterback literally can't stay healthy. So it's a different conversation. And I'll tell you what, of the three local teams, the one that I think is actually being overbought a bit is K-State. I think K-State, their year to pop is 2025. But there's a lot, I think a little too much hype going into Avery Johnson right now. All right, I got to see it to believe it going into year one as a starter. And I love the combo with Dylan Edwards and, DJ Giddens and all those guys. But at the same time, just new offensive coordinator, got some new pieces along the lines, new quarterback with a new OC. 2025 feels like the year for Kansas State. I think some people are overbuying a little bit on the Wildcats this year, if I'm just looking at it from afar. 913-408-7957. But a great time right now to be a sports fan in the Kansas City area, I'll tell you that much.
And Mizzou looks really good, but that's a tough conference.
That's the thing. I think Missouri can obviously find itself right there in the top 15 all season long, but gosh dang, the SEC is just absolutely loaded here in 2024 with the additions of course, Oklahoma and Texas. You look at their schedule, and it's not the toughest schedule you could have in the SEC, but, you got to go to Texas A&M early October, Auburn, Alabama, Oklahoma. That's tough sledding, no doubt about it. Yeah, there's no way that you can look at Kamala Harris's record and talk about how she's going to improve America. Heck, you had this that I played yesterday from over the weekend during her rally in Phoenix, where her fans aren't even talking about how she can improve America. They're just talking about, her and what she looks like.
We're gonna win. We're gonna win. Not to be, cocky, but I'm optimistic.
I've always been a supporter of she's a woman, and she's black. And she'll be the first president candidate that I think she will win. And like I said, I'm all about equal access and equal women health choice.
Women, she's a woman. No, she's a woman, not she's a woman. That may be a worthy drop for the show at some point. She's a woman and she's black. It's like, okay, and what'll she do to improve your life? Equality. Did you know she's a woman? And she's black? Equal access. Equal, equality, equality. Equal outcomes, equal access, equal this, equal that. She's a woman. Oh, man. And they mock people that go to Trump rallies. Come on now. You kidding me? Unreal.
Come on, man.
All right. Now, speaking of things that are just incredible media bias, you know how for the last couple of months, Trump has been promoting and pushing this policy about no taxing on tips? He's been going hard on this. It's been a big part of his campaign. He's promoted it in places like Nevada, where a lot of people, of course, work on tips. He's left notes on his receipts saying no tax on tips, vote Trump, in different places that he stopped around the country. And it's a great policy in terms of, just politically, it's wise. A lot of people that work for tips obviously are folks who are feeling the brunt of the inflation the last 3.5 years. And when you're working for tips, I think there's a downside to all this too. let's take a restaurant, for example. How would you possibly navigate a world where suddenly those working for tips, i.e. the server and the busboy or busgirl, they're not getting taxed on the majority of their income, but now the guy or gal who is in the back room cooking the food is still getting taxed because they're hourly or salary, and, it creates a whole slew of problems potentially. But overall, listen, I'm all about cutting people's taxes, so whatever it takes. And if this is a step in the right direction to working class Americans paying the government less, sign me up. So this has been a big thing for Donald Trump, right? Well, Kamala Harris has rolled out the exact same policy position. Kamala Harris is now proposing to end taxes on tips. The only thing that she has really come out for policy-wise in 3+ weeks since she has been the presumptive nominee is not taxing tips, which literally is just out of Donald Trump's playbook. Oh, my goodness. So we finally get something from her, and it's just ripping off Donald Trump. So here's how this was covered by CBS News. CBS News, when Donald Trump proposed this a couple of months ago, ran the following headline and post on X. Former President Donald Trump vows to stop taxing tips, and it would cost the federal government up to $250 billion over 10 years, according to a nonpartisan watchdog group. That's the headline from CBS News. CBS News writes this headline this week about Kamala Harris proposing the same exact policy that she ripped right off from Donald Trump. Here's how they write it. CBS News, same outlet, right? Quote, Vice President Kamala Harris is rolling out a new policy position, saying she'll fight to end taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers. Tell me if you can spot the difference there. Donald Trump proposes the policy, and by the way, he proposes it first, and it's, oh boy, it's going to cost the government a lot of money. Well, by the way, the government just operates off of our money anyway, so it's not like the government has anything without us, but that's beside the point. What do they focus on? Oh boy, this is going to cost the government too much. We can't afford that. People in need that $250 billion over 10 years. We can't have working stiffs keep their own money. That's not good policy now, is it? The same idea is proposed by Kamala Harris. It's ripped off from Donald Trump. And what do they frame it as? How do they phrase it? Kamala Harris will fight. She's going to fight for you. Fight to end taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers. I promise you, no matter how much you think the media feeds you absolute bogus garbage every day, it's even more than you think it is. The level of gaslighting from these folks has no limits. And it won't have any limits for the next 12 weeks. No way, no how. I also think it's ridiculous that we're talking about going back to school on August 13th, but I will save that. I will save it. I just think it's ridiculous, and I'll explain why coming up. Rob is in Kansas City. What's up, Rob? You're on KCMO, big man.
Hey, how's it going, Mundo? I was calling about how taxes keep going up on schools, but yet none of the bus drivers or teachers or any of that are getting raises. Well, if you go looking at the history on both sides of the state line, at least half a dozen times over the last 10 years have taxes been raised for, quote unquote, going to schools, roads, and things of that nature, right? Well, that's been... Go ahead.
It's the great way to get more tax dollars into their coffers, right? Don't you want good roads? Don't you want good schools? Well, give us more money.
Right, exactly. But here's the thing. Tests show that students are failing at an even higher rate than they were a decade ago.
Oh, bingo.
By at least 15%.
Bingo.
Well, if that's the case, we should be putting our money into our teachers or what I call the service industry, because we lack in this country, because I'm an HVAC technician. I'm part of what helps the world go round. If you start paying your service industry people, bus drivers, teachers, mechanics, anything of that nature, a higher wage, everything else is going to increase as far as the economy goes, because the people who make the world go round who buy tools, who buy clothes for going to work, school, things of that nature, they're going to increase the economy because they have the money, the extra cash to pay for the things they need to do their job.
Well, here's what I would say. I mean, listen, you guys in the HVAC business, you're doing well right now, right, Rob? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'm not doing half bad, but given the way inflation has gone,
no, I understand.
You took my raise right out of my pocket.
Absolutely,
like
absolutely.
It went gone away, and I make $39.50 an hour. That's
very good.
Not a bad wage.
No, you're in a good spot. Well, the reason I bring that up, Rob, and thank you, man. The reason I bring that up is because right now HVAC folks are in need. There's not a lot of them. We're always going to need them. People are not pursuing that career as much as they should be based on what the marketplace needs. So if you're in that line of work, you're doing pretty well, like Rob. That's a great spot to be in. So the marketplace has taken care of that. And hopefully the marketplace will encourage more people to get into that line of work because they see the amount of money that can be made. Not just working in it like Rob, but, look at the guys in this town that have become multimillionaire business owners in the HVAC landscape. You can think of half a dozen off the top of your head. I don't want to start ripping off names because if I forget somebody, it's going to be like someone who's sponsored on the show and people are going to get all pissed off at me. But you can name all the big names and folks who have, made tremendous amounts of money in the HVAC space or plumbing or any of that stuff, right? It's tougher in teaching because obviously it's part of the public sector. But to Rob's point, I have always been of the belief that when it comes to being against the increases in property taxes for schools, it's never about the teacher. It's about the fact that when you look at how much money is made in the bureaucracy, in the administration, where there is massive amounts of bloat, and you've seen the most amount of growth and money being spent, it's not about the kids. It's basically become a jobs program for adults. And that's the problem. And unfortunately, I believe too many of the teachers are getting hoodwinked by their own union to say, yeah, you're getting screwed because people don't want to give you more of their property taxes. It's like, no, they're giving you a lie. It just is not filtering down to the places it should be, like the classroom, for school supplies, for the kids, and yes, for the teachers. That's where it needs to be going. Not using it as a government jobs program for adults. And in too many cases, including, here in the Kansas City area, that's what it's become. I know it's a little nuanced for some people, not you, not this audience, but you can be pro-teacher and pro-teacher raises while also saying, do you need all the money we're giving you? Or do you need more money every year based on what we're giving you? Those are both fair questions to ask. But I also think as many Kansans and Kansas kids get set to go back to school today, I think about something that was passed back in 2019. Governor Parsons signed a bill that year which basically pushed back the start date of schools in Missouri. The new law pushes back the earliest date possible. I mean, it was a new law 5 years ago. I'm reading this from Fox 4. Pushes back the earliest possible start date for public schools by an extra 4 days. And the point was to get more, first off, tourism, a little more summer vacation for Missouri kids. Might want to go down to the lake or whatnot. And not have, the calendar flip to August and it's like, well, time to go back to school. I always think that school should run Tuesday after Labor Day through June 20. June 15, June 20, somewhere in there. I know it starts to get hot, but I don't know. I'm sitting here on August 13th. Claire's going off to kindergarten today, first time. And I'm like, it just doesn't feel right. Not only because I can't believe she's already in kindergarten, but it's August 13th. Come on now. It's still summer. What are we doing here? And I did tell her I'd give her a quick FaceTime here during the commercial break. So if that's okay with you guys, I'm going to give her a quick FaceTime here. Give her a little pep talk. All right? Stand up for yourself.
Yep.
Anyone gives you gruff, you give it right back to them. No, I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to give her a little pep talk. She doesn't need to hear anything more than that from me. So that is, I know for many of you, getting the kids out the door today, school is back in action, and away we go. I also think it's a little crazy that kindergartners go to full day school now. I mean, when I was a kid, it was a half day. Mm-hmm. But I get it, with the world we live in and working parents all over the place. Unfortunately, for many, it's just adjusting to the society that we now have where, parents are working and they got to figure out what to do with the kids. But do I think kindergartners need full day school? No, I don't. I think a half day is plenty. But I get it. Things are changing fast.